In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro delves into the controversial figure of Andrew Tate, exploring the implications of his rising popularity within conservative circles. Shapiro begins by highlighting the upcoming hearings for President Trump's cabinet nominees, the fallout from the California wildfires, and the ongoing controversies surrounding figures like Gavin Newsom and Andrew Tate. He emphasizes the importance of maintaining conservative values and integrity, particularly when engaging with polarizing personalities like Tate. Shapiro discusses a recent incident where Benny Johnson hosted Andrew Tate alongside Alina Habba, a member of Trump's legal team. During the interview, Habba praised Tate, which sparked significant backlash. Shapiro argues that while it is acceptable to interview controversial figures, it becomes problematic when conservatives cheer for individuals who do not align with their values. He points out that Tate, who has built a following through provocative and often misogynistic content, does not embody the principles that conservatives claim to uphold. Shapiro critiques the tendency among some on the right to conflate free speech with uncritical support for figures like Tate. He asserts that engaging with such individuals should involve asking tough questions rather than simply applauding their controversial statements. He emphasizes that Tate's persona is not one of virtuous masculinity, but rather a harmful caricature that undermines the values conservatives should champion. Shapiro acknowledges the appeal of Tate's brand of masculinity, particularly in a society that has often vilified traditional male roles. He notes that many young men feel lost in a culture that has demonized masculinity, creating a vacuum that figures like Tate exploit. However, Shapiro warns that the version of masculinity Tate promotes is toxic and destructive, focusing on self-interest rather than the protection and upliftment of others. He highlights Tate's self-proclaimed identity as a bad man and a pimp, pointing out that his business practices, including running a webcam operation, are morally questionable. Shapiro argues that conservatives should not overlook these aspects simply because Tate expresses anti-left sentiments. He stresses that true conservatism requires a commitment to virtue, and supporting someone like Tate contradicts that commitment. The podcast also touches on Tate's ongoing legal issues, including serious allegations of exploitation and abuse. Shapiro discusses the recent developments in Romania, where Tate has been placed under house arrest amid investigations into his activities. He draws parallels between Tate's actions and the grooming gang scandals in the UK, emphasizing the moral implications of supporting someone with such a troubling background. Shapiro argues that the right must confront the reality of Tate's actions rather than romanticize him as a champion of masculinity. He points out that many of Tate's statements and behaviors are antithetical to the values conservatives claim to uphold, and failing to address this contradiction is a disservice to the movement. Shapiro warns that the embrace of figures like Tate could have detrimental effects on the conservative movement. He argues that the right should not sacrifice its principles for the sake of popularity or clicks. Instead, conservatives should focus on promoting individuals who genuinely embody the values of integrity, responsibility, and respect for others. He emphasizes that the pendulum of political discourse often swings between extremes, and the right must avoid falling into the trap of embracing radical figures simply because they oppose the left. Shapiro calls for a return to virtue as a guiding principle for conservatism, urging listeners to reject the allure of figures like Tate who do not align with those values. Shapiro also discusses the ongoing wildfires in California, linking the crisis to broader issues of governance and policy failures. He criticizes the state's leadership, particularly Governor Gavin Newsom, for their inadequate response to the fires and the underlying issues that have contributed to the crisis. Shapiro points out that California's environmental policies and budget cuts have left the state ill-prepared to handle such disasters. He highlights the disconnect between the state's progressive policies and the practical needs of its residents, arguing that the focus on well-intentioned policies has often led to disastrous outcomes. Shapiro calls for accountability from political leaders and a reevaluation of the policies that have contributed to the state's ongoing struggles.